unapologetic, unadulterated, uncompromising. This is the blackchannel.net radio. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority, of course, with Professor Black Truth. Welcome back to the Black Channel, brother.
B1 family.
And you are tuned in to the home, the haven, the stronghold, and the super fortress of intelligent black thought. This is the blackchannel.net radio. And we're glad to have you all with us here this evening, as always. You know, we're getting ready to do some of the final edits here on 7 a.m., of course. And for those of you who are wondering how it's coming along, you're supposed to already be subscribed to my YouTube channel. That's the first thing. If you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, that's why you're asking how it's coming along. Because we only put up another video today. You probably missed that if you're not subscribed to it. So you definitely want to be subscribed to both of my YouTube channels, The Black Authority and TBA. So one YouTube channel is The Black Authority, the other one's TBA. I'm not sure why YouTube is giving such a hard time with it, but some people have been saying they can't. Trying to pull it up directly is giving them some problems, but my other YouTube channel is TBA. So you definitely want to be a part of that and make sure you don't miss out on the happenings there. I wasn't going to broadcast today. And then I had an opportunity to take a look at a couple of things, and I think Jasmine Davis had posted a link earlier today that I had seen, and it really got my attention. It really got my attention because it just underscores that the time is short, people. The time is short. The time is short because it took decades to be able to get into this hole, and unfortunately they can bury you within the course of a few years. For those of you who are old enough to remember when Spike Lee put out Do the Right Thing and Crooklyn, I mean, black folk thought that we had Brooklyn locked down. Harlem was already showing fraying and cracking around the edges, but Brooklyn, you know, we felt that because of the projects in Bedford-Stuyvesant, that we were so disgusting, so poverty-stricken, so pus-covered, such a cesspool that white folk would never even consider stepping 10 miles in the direction of where we were in those areas. We actually thought that being impoverished was a protection. We thought that our poverty provided a barrier of protection against white society, that because we were so pathetic and impoverished, that we were so disgusting that they would never deign to soil their hands by coming anywhere near us. And we thought that made us safe, that if we just bowed enough and buck danced enough and stayed impoverished and covered in filth enough, that would protect us from white society. That if we remained filthy, that they were so clean, so pure, so pristine, that if we could just keep ourselves covered and mired in filth, that would protect us. And so you have had generation after generation of filthy, nasty, disgusting bastard baby maker after bastard baby maker, welfare Section 8 hood rat sluts, generation after generation, raising their sons to be homo thugs and failures. Generation after generation, you told yourselves that if you crippled your own children, if you took the 30 pieces of silver in the form of the food stamps and the welfare in the Section 8, that would be your protection. That if you crippled and destroyed your own children for a welfare check, that would save you. That was exactly what they did. They destroyed their own children for a welfare check and thought, well, this will keep me safe. Damn the children, you're screwing you over just the cost of doing business. It's all about me. Twerk, twerk, twerk. Brothers and sisters, in just the last 10 years, we have watched as white empowerment, capitalism, has begun with a relentless and ruthless incursion into the only two real black enclaves in New York, Brooklyn and Harlem. I sat there and I witnessed it for myself with my own eyes over the course of 9 hours in Harlem. I witnessed it myself. Just last year, I witnessed as from 12 midnight to 8 a.m. Ironic considering the name of the documentary. From 12 midnight to 8 a.m. I drove the streets of Harlem. Quentin Adams will bear us witness. We drove the streets of Harlem. And as the sun began to rise the next day, the first 5 people that I saw were all white. And not just any old white folk. These were little old ladies. That was the first person I saw. She was a little old white lady. Came out of this building that we were parked in front of. With her little, inferior, minuscule, mini-sized dog in her arm. Wearing this black fur coat. This was not a fancy building, by the way. She just comes out with this black fur coat and her little dog cradled in her arm. Now, she was wary. She was looking around. But she just kept walking. She was not afraid of black people. You see, you thought that if you were nasty and disgusting enough, that you thought white folk were afraid of you. White people have never been afraid of you. Never. They consider you disgusting, but they weren't afraid of you. They just did not want to touch you. But understand, at some point, you have to do the laundry. And you know how you do the laundry? You know how you wash your dishes? You wash your dishes by filling up the sink with soap, and you grab your dirty, filthy dishes. If you left them out too long, you got mold on them. And you take them in the sink, and you grab your sponge or your scrub pad, and you scrub them clean. And your hands are down in the filthy water. And when you get done, you take out what you scrubbed the filth off of it. You scrub the filth off of what you intend to keep. And then you flush the filth and let it out of the sink. And black people in Brooklyn and Harlem and in New York have said, we will be the filth and that will save us. And what you are watching is the forces of gentrification. Gentrification is that sink of soap and water. And they are now here to scrub their streets, which are the dishes. They're here to scrub the filth off the streets. So the buildings they're leaving intact. Those old buildings that we've been sitting there squatting in. There's a documentary called The 1%. And it was done by, he's one of the heirs of the Johnson & Johnson fortune. It's a documentary called The 1%. And he goes around Chicago. And they went to Cabrini Green. And they're talking about how they're taking old housing projects and renovating them into condos. Nice condos. And then they showed Negroes in the exact same housing projects just a little ways away from it. Dilapidated, run down, squalor, filth. And the white folk and the Asians are stepping in and saying, you know what, we're just going to do this how we're going to do this here. We're not the least bit worried. Not at all. They are taking what black folk have been sitting in all this time, and they are saying, you know what, we are going to... You are watching the sheer brute force of financial means and money coming to the forefront to take things over. That's what you're witnessing and watching right now, is they are taking what you've got and showing that they have the ability to renovate it. That is what economic power is supposed to be doing. Economic power is supposed to be taking what you've got. Economic power is supposed to be flexing its muscles. Economic power is supposed to come in and do that. And what they are witnessing is that they are we are completely and totally unprepared for what's happening. Because it took decades to send you into poverty, but I can build a new housing condo in 6 months. Did you all understand that you can build or renovate a building and turn it into condos in 6 months? Now, the story that I was reading from the New York Times, and the title of the story is called Life After Brooklyn, and they're talking to nothing but a bunch of white folk. That's all they're talking to is white folk. These were white folk who, while Jay-Z and the rest of them had you all fooled into thinking that white folk were scared of Brooklyn, these white folk are coming into Brooklyn in housing that black folk have had for decades. And we're talking about paying $500,000 for it. And in some cases, even more than that. And they listed all the neighborhoods there, by the way. They listed the neighborhoods, including the notorious Bedford-Stuyvesant, where they're sitting up here talking about $500,000 to $1 million. Bedford-Stuyvesant. That's right. Bed-Stuy. You thought that your filth and poverty, that if you drug the rest of us down in your filth, and if you decided to do nothing with your life, that you could drag the rest of us down with you. And these people are showing you it didn't take decades for gentrification to work. Brothers and sisters, they have a waiting list of white bankers. Now, that was the other part of the story that it talks about, is that there are bankers, investment bankers, who are saying, I'll pay $1 million for that condo in Williamsburg, in Bed-Stuy. I'll pay $1 million for it. That's right. You thought you'd never see an investment banker walk in the streets of Bedford-Stuyvesant, and he's sitting here saying, you know, I could buy a whole building here for what it would cost me $100 million for in Midtown. I'll take 2. Hell, for what it cost me for an apartment in Midtown, I can buy a whole building for in Bedford-Stuyvesant. I'll take 2. And you've got white workers now, middle class people, willing to pay $500,000, and they are lined up, but the prices are too expensive in Midtown Manhattan and Greater Manhattan, so now they're moving on down into Brooklyn and Harlem. All that economic power that wasn't enough to swim with the 1% in Midtown Manhattan, but it's more than enough to push your black ass out. The bottom 10%, you ain't got a damn chance in Brooklyn and Harlem. And all those white kids that you thought were scared of you, man, they're buying up stuff left and right in Brooklyn now, and you can't compete. You never thought you would see the day that there would be a feeding frenzy and an economic gold rush into Brooklyn and Harlem. A lot of folk are going to spend a lot of money, and a lot of people are going to make a lot of money. But guess what? Practically none of those people, either spending or making the money, will be black. But just about everybody who will be removed will be. And what you are all finding out is that what we told you before, that they make money either way it goes. They make money off of low-income housing, either as the landlord or the land developer. Black people's purpose in Brooklyn and Harlem was to ensure that property prices on the outskirts of Manhattan would remain low, so that when the developers were finally ready, when the city was finally reached an economic tipping point and reached that critical mass where you've done as much in Manhattan as you can, the wall, that barrier that you thought separated you from the wealth of Manhattan, has burst wide open now. The wall has burst open like the levees in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, and now the floodwaters are washing you away. Spike Lee can bemoan it, and I feel sympathy for the innocent people caught in it, but there's nothing you can do now. You made all these mistakes decades ago because when you should have become owners, you refused to do so. You figured being the biggest slut in Bedford-Stuyvesant could be a lifestyle, and they're showing you now that it's not a lifestyle, it's a death style. And you are now about to become extinct because you do not own, control, or have anything to pass down. That was the only thing that could have protected you from gentrification, was what you own and what you control. But black people do not own or control anything. And now in Brooklyn, you are being washed away. The neighborhoods that black folk have been in, and you were, oh, well, it don't matter, I'll pass poverty on to my children. Now you're realizing that you won't be able to stay there long enough. Because as these white suburbanites are now turning Brooklyn into a white suburb, that's what they're doing. You have found out now, you figured, well, I'm not in the suburbs. Well, guess what? The suburb is coming to you. You never imagined that the suburbs could come to you. You felt you were so filthy they were afraid of you. And what they're showing you is that, buddy, a person with money ain't scared of nothing. Especially not a bunch of broke, busted, dusty, dumb Negroes in Brooklyn. They're not scared of you. You're filthy. They're not afraid of you. They just don't want to touch you. And guess what? They won't have to. They're going to send bulldozers and renovators, and if you don't get out the way, they will send the marshals to come and remove you. But understand, all you're going to get is a notice to vacate. That's all you're going to get. And all they need is one person to sell one building, and they will pay whatever it is. You can tell them right now, I don't want 100,000, I want 100 million. And all they will say is, do you take a check? You take a check? Yeah, we'll buy that. The developers come in, they build high-rise. Do you know that right now you could decimate and destroy black people in Brooklyn with 5 high-rise luxury condos? Something like the Escala. Look it up. Something like Trump Tower. Do you understand that all it takes is one of those? And not even the full-size Trump Tower either, by the way. All you have to do is put up one 20-story high-rise building. You could choose 5 strategic spots in Brooklyn, put up 5 high-rise buildings, and gentrification in the form of rising property tax values would destroy black people and wipe them out of Brooklyn tomorrow morning. You would have black people removed from Brooklyn within 12 calendar months. All you need is just 5 high-rise luxury condos, and black folk would be gone. Not next decade, next year. Black people could sit there and watch the days fall off the calendar until the 31st of December, when the rollover comes, and it's like, okay, and understand, it actually would not take, Professor Black Truth, it wouldn't actually take 12 months. If I built a luxury high-rise condo today in Brooklyn, and then the tax assessor's office comes out today, next month, and says that the property values in that neighborhood have quintupled since that luxury condo has been built, don't you know that in 5 months, 4 months, the tax assessor's office could say, okay, here is your new tax bill. But my tax bill last year was $200. Yes, and this year your tax bill is $8,000 because you live 2 blocks from the luxury condos that were built. And, well, I thought they were higher over there. They are higher. Their tax bills over there are $15,000. Your tax bill is $8,000. Do you want to pay that with cash, check, or money order? I can't pay it at all. Then I guess you won't be staying. You don't even need a full year for that scenario to happen. We just need that could happen to you in 4 months, 3 months, depending on when the tax assessor comes out and makes his determinations. And you will get a tax bill when he gets back to his office for whatever he appraises the new values at. And once that happens, you're gone. So when I say 12 calendar months, that was the long view. That was the generous estimation. The not so generous estimation is you could be gone in 90 days. You could be gone in 90 days. They could have that tax bill in your hands in 90 days. And you'll be sitting there with your big lips poked out, talking about money is for white folk. Economic empowerment's for white folk. Hotep, I'm super spiritually groovy. You know what? Nobody feels super spiritually groovy when they're homeless. Professor Black Truth, could that scenario happen?
It's already underway, brother. This is the high cost of low power, the high cost of low income. It is the high cost of low living. You see, there are a lot of black people who have been spending a lot of time trying to talk themselves into a dream world, and in that dream world, apparently, there's 2 rules. The first rule is white people are going to take care of me to some degree or another. They just didn't want me at the top, but that's okay. I don't mind being at the bottom. I will lower my standards. And the second rule is don't you ever tell me to raise my standards. So that's how you get the welfare queens, the twerkers, the frauds, fakers, and bastard baby makers, the iron triangle of decadence in the black community who sit there and tell us it doesn't really matter. See, it's easy to say that when there's some sort of government program or whenever white people are still able to give you a job with a broom or swabbing toilets. It's very easy to be on the coon train under those circumstances. When white power seems to be something out there on the horizon or white power is out in the suburbs. It's very easy to be a coon then. But, you know, there's an old saying in political circles. If you don't go and visit a bad neighborhood will come and visit you. And the single most dangerous neighborhood in New York City is Wall Street. They are now coming to pay Brooklyn and Harlem a visit. And they're playing the game of big bank takes little bank. The same kind of stuff that you thought was only reserved for Anacostia and others. Well, now it's in New York now. Yeah, they're taking a bite out of your apple, all right. You know, it's interesting, very interesting, because the same mindset that you find here, you find it among other white people elsewhere. The Israelis, when talking about the Palestinians, they call it cutting the grass. Every once in a while, you got to go into Palestine with some gunships and cut the grass. Well, the thing is, this is cutting the grass American style. So for all those people out there who thought that perhaps there would be a safe haven established for you, and that white people, your few white liberal friends who talk dreamy-eyed about the Harlem Renaissance and about the uniqueness of black culture in New York, man, as far as they're concerned, they bought the picture book. That's enough for them. They don't need you around. They don't want you around, and they ain't going to make sure you stay around. The only way you're going to stay in New York is if you make that to happen. But make it happen with what? You don't come to a gunfight barehanded. And that's what we've come to this gunfight with. Empty hands. Empty hands, empty stomachs, no morale. This is going to be a bloodbath. It's not going to be a fight. It's just going to be a slaughter. And what are those black people who spent so much time telling you that it's okay to be broke? that we can be at the bottom and survive, what are they going to say as they get turned out in the streets? And there will be no outrage. There will be no protest of any sort. Ferguson is showing you. Ferguson is white people sending a message to the world that they're not tolerating dissent. So please don't think that that's not going to happen in New York, which has the most well-funded civil anti-terrorism unit outside of the federal system. You sit in New York City, it's okay to stop and frisk. That's why Eric Garner, he's sitting here thinking to himself, you know, these guys, surely they need a reason to touch me. No, they don't. Stop and frisk. The police state has never been stronger than in New York. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this. If you think you're going to protest your way out, if you think that old Reverend Al's going to help you, man, you are crazy. And if you think your good liberal buddies, the white people you think are your liberal buddies, are going to help you, the ones who will try to lend some support, they don't matter. And the ones who do matter ain't going to lend no support. Because at the end of the day, civility for white people stops at the cash register. It's as simple as that. It stops right there where the money gets made. Don't believe it? Ask Donald Sterling. A bigger Jewish liberal you would be hard-pressed to find. Had black people over at his place for a couple of his cookouts, a couple of his barbecues, and the rest of the time saying, I don't want these people at my games. See, there were some Negroes in Los Angeles who thought they had friends where they really didn't. Now, as black people, we've been failing to ask some essential questions, which is, what in the hell are we going to do to ensure that we survive as a people, as a community, and as a culture? If you look in the mirror and you think that black has some sort of value, then these things will matter to you. On the other hand, if you think that you're going to integrate your way to success, or that we're going to swirl our way to a better future, a bunch of biracial babies who will be just as confused and mixed up as can be, then what you've really said is you don't care if you have a future. And that's fine. You won't. We will. The coming storm is going to destroy a lot. And it's about time, because there's a lot of black people who've been sitting on the fence thinking that they'll go which way the wind blows, but it never occurred to them that the wind might blow them away. That never occurred to them. And what you see happening in Harlem, this is the aggregate result of 3 generations of failure. You failed to build an economy. You failed to lean on what little liberal support you thought you had to get some sort of economy. You failed to solidify what little power you had in the 60s. You failed to at least educate your children that, hey, we're all we got. When them good white folks show up, you better be wary. They are not showing up as friends. You sit here indulging all sorts of meaningless delusions and diversions because white supremacy is out in the suburbs. White supremacy is on Wall Street. They don't come down here where the black folks are. They don't troll through the gutter. Man, white people have been coming down there to get their drugs for years. And other white businessmen have been coming there to ply their various illegal trades for years. The only thing they don't want is to live next to you, and they got a solution for that one as well. And what are you going to do when the bulldozers show up? What are you going to do when the same well-armed thugs in the sheriff's department who wreaked so much havoc on the Occupy movements, they decide that they're going to come to Harlem and Brooklyn? What you going to do? Oh, you're going to hope for sympathy is what you're going to be hoping for. Just like the protesters in Ferguson. By the way, how much help has all their sympathy gotten? Every night the same thing, white supremacy showing you the same footage. They're doing it to make a point. They don't have to have a get out of town before sundown. They can lock you down in your own town by sundown. And when the tax assessor shows up and tells you you can't afford to live here anymore, Happy New Year. You're out on the streets. with no fallback position and no backup plan. It might have been cute to spend a lot of time listening to clowns talking about twerking and getting turned up at the club and getting your chakras in resonance. That's all cute when you have a little bit of income coming in and you think that you can be frivolous. But now you're seeing the real world. They're not going to allow you to be at the bottom. They're going to push you out, all the way out. It will be merciless. Your children will be on the streets with you. And yes, there will be some news cameras there, because they want others to see what is coming. The plan was not for you to be a permanent underclass. The plan was for you to be at some point gone. You were the unfinished business of slavery. And the 2 or 3 handpicked Negroes in the congressional black talkers, they are finding themselves marginalized, powerless. The only voice you will have is your voice, but you have not cultivated one because you have no power. And the people who used to ridicule what we said 5 years ago, they're not so bold now. We warned you that white supremacy was going to be on the march, and it was going to be unlike anything that anyone in living memory had ever seen. We warned you that what was coming was not going to be the KKK and the Knights of the White Camellia. It was not going to be the hard stomping goose steppers of the white Aryan resistance. It was not going to be even covert white supremacist organizations like the John Birch Society. We told you that it was going to be the white economy that was going to show up. The guys who were going to come in were going to have business suits and degrees from Wharton's and Harvard Business School and UCLA. That's who's showing up for you now. It's not going to be a lineup of Klansmen. It is going to be a lineup of hedge fund managers and real estate developers. And as your homes get torn down, with you pathetically holding hands in front of them singing gospel songs, because as we all know, nothing stops white supremacy like the gospel. As these pathetic scenes will play themselves out, you are going to be praying to God. You're going to be hoping that Creflo Dollar comes and does a sit-in with you. You'll be begging Reverend Al to give you a few minutes on his show. In other words, you'll be doing things that don't matter. Your extermination will not be a process. It's going to be an event that the world will see. And the one thing that Professor Truth says about it is, this is good. We have been lacking true clarity for a long time. A lot of people have been able to get away with saying, well, all white folks ain't like that, and other kinds of trick talk meant to lull us into a false sense of security. We need the debate to be settled. So yes, while I do not like what I'm seeing in Harlem and Brooklyn and other places in New York and around the country, I do look and say, good. Because I'm tired of arguing. I'm tired of telling black people that being broke is the last rung on the ladder to being dead. I'm tired of telling black people that you have to stop it with all of this dreaming about integration and dreaming about swirling. We do not sit here and tell people to hate anyone, but there are some simple truths in the world. When you sit here and see white people who have the money and you have none, and it's like that all over the country, there's a reality there. You cannot live in a dream. Professor Ben Yakinen said it best. He said a dream will drive you crazy if you try to live by it. So no, I am not going to sit here and tell especially our young black babies that it's okay to be colorblind in a world that is not. I'm not going to sit here and tell grown black men that you can integrate your way to success in a world that's looking to push you out. And I'm sure as hell not going to tell our people that there's going to be another pathway to survival other than our own empowerment. Even if black people were the richest people on earth, it would mean very little if we did not cultivate that wealth amongst ourselves. You ever see a person who dies of internal hemorrhaging? Why does that happen? Because there are serious breaks in the blood vessels. And the thing they need to survive is leaking out. No matter how much they got of it, they're losing it. That's what's happening with us. We're being bled dry. Totally dry. And the next few years are going to be a complete horror show. The kind of stuff that you saw in East Point, Georgia, 39,000 strong, independent black women standing out in the blazing Georgia summer sun, fighting over 800 housing vouchers. Now, I've never been very strong at math, but I'll tell you right now, 39,000 people fighting over 800 housing vouchers. I think a few people are going to be left out. I just do. And you're also seeing what's happening in Ferguson. Bull Connor ain't got nothing on this. You thought the days of tear gassing children was over. You thought the days of the cops billy clubbing people was over. They're out there with, I mean, they didn't bring the fire department. In the 60s, they brought the fire department. This time, they brought the military. Armored personnel carriers with M60 machine guns on top, aimed at armless people. White supremacy's not playing any games. They don't give a damn how it looks. You thought a couple of liberals giving you some outraged headlines in the 80s and 90s meant something. It means nothing. The only people who have the ability to actually substantively protest this stuff are black people, but you can't protest anything without power. You change nothing without power. We have refused to take upon ourselves the adult responsibilities that go along with ensuring your survival. You've got to build an economy, because an economy is the system by which resources are distributed. But in order to have an economy, you got to control some resources. And once you have that economy built, you must have the means to you must have the means to fortify it from within and to insulate it from without. You fortify it from within through a common code. The participants of that economy must be on the same page. There must be a clear system of rewards and punishments that go along with this code of conduct, and they must be enforced across the board. People who benefit you, people within your group who are doing the right thing but cannot get the benefits of it, will soon stop doing it. And those within your group, as we've seen all over, who can do the wrong things and get away with it, they're just going to get worse. And the way that you insulate your economy from without is, first of all, you understand that business is warfare. And as Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, one of the first rudiments of all warfare is you must infiltrate your enemy. Look what white supremacy did even here at theblackchannel.net. I am not so naive as to think that of the dozens of people listening right now, that we don't have a few trolls and a few lurkers. We got enemies here, right here. This is how it works. This is how the game is played. So what are you doing to counter that? Do you know who your city councilman is? Do you know who your state representative is? When's the last time you've talked to them? You can't talk to a man who you don't know. And the time to be getting things from your congressman or to be getting things from your state legislature, from your state legislator, is not when the bulldozers show up and white supremacy's on the march. You're supposed to have your plan in place long before then. That's the first part of insulating yourself from without. You find those forces of antagonism and you get your hooks in them. That's called influence. The second part of insulating yourself from without is you're going to have a concrete means of protecting what is yours. During the LA riots, the Koreans were ready. Black Wall Street wasn't ready. Instead of anteing up again and getting back in the game, the black folks sat there and said, well, I guess we're done. See, they raised the Chinatowns too, but the Chinese got back in the game. Yes, they had support from their home countries. But they also had a group of people who realized that business was war. We've never looked at it as warfare. We look at business as a type of social interaction. But in a society that is geared toward trying to grind you into the dirt, that is an illusion you cannot afford. For the European, everything that moves for war. In the black community, what moves for anything? Fornication, drugs, trying to find a way to have a good time, having a good time in bad conditions. So no, while I am not pleased, while it does not make me happy to see what is going on, I do recognize that it is a necessary evil, and an evil that we can do nothing about at any rate. Who, even among intelligent black society, we are not yet at the point, we have not been able to aggregate our strength to the point where we would be able to make a substantive push back. We are going to get there. On a long enough timeline, we will get there. But even so, these are the necessary losses that we're simply going to have to accept. This is the price of sitting on your hands and indulging all sorts of daydreams. Those of you who think that your chakras are going to save you, those who think that feminism is going to help, those who have talked themselves into believing that gay is the new black, anything to get off that prickly race issue, keep it up. Keep doing it. All of you black feminists out there, you're going to find out real quick that the Negro bedwench hustle has run its course. Not that there were many who could get in on it in the first place. And those of you who think that being gay and black makes you non-threatening, you're right, it does. But it doesn't make you any more desirable in their eyes. It doesn't make you any more tolerable. The only thing you've done is to make sure that you have the honor of being the last one put on the cattle cars for oblivion. That's all you've done. And the coons and the steppin' fetchits, go ahead and ply your trade. Go ahead and try to find the nearest white person you can get a pat on the head from. White people have been very good for giving Negroes a pat on the head just before they plunge that knife into your throat. See, they're not playing a game here. They are deadly serious, and they are ready across the board. You remember that crazy rancher out in Oregon or Utah, whatever it was? He was angry because the federal government apparently did some cow tipping on their property that he had his cows grazing on. When he sent out the clarion call for white support did not show up with placards and signs. They did not send their preachers. They sent their militia. And here they were with the body armor, and here they were with the M4 assault rifles, taking up sniper posts on the bridge above federal troops, might I add. And the gear that these guys had, the way that they were decked out, you couldn't tell the difference between the militarized marshals and this so-called militia. You couldn't tell the difference. And the reason you couldn't tell the difference is, at the end of the day, you're looking at flip sides of the same coin. You're seeing two factions inside the machine of white supremacy who are having a brief argument. That's the reason why they look so similar. And might I add, the government, with these guys in front of them holding assault rifles, they never sat there and said, bring out the tear gas. They didn't sit there and bring in armored personnel carriers with M60 machine guns. They didn't do all that. They sat there and said, hey, we need to talk this over, don't we? Uncle Sam left. That ought to let you know what you're up against. See, they're not going to be sitting here shooting at each other. They'll shoot at you, though, because you think they're your friend. What's that old saying? With friends like these? So the bloodbath has not even really begun. And the slaughter is only yet in the offing. We are hearing the first faint echoes. That's what this is. The fight's going to begin in earnest. Now, I happened to be at the bookstore the other day. I go to the bookstore because I like to see what new propaganda the loyal opposition is trying to foist. And while I was there, passed by the magazine rack. Of course, they have a healthy section on guns. There are more gun magazines now than there were 10 years ago, by the way. Just thought you'd like to know. And on the cover of one of them, they had basically a white woman with her white daughter under her arm, and the caption was something to the effect of "Protect your family." Now, I would love to see some black people, if there's any who have the guts, who would have posters of black people holding guns saying, "Protect yourself from police violence. Protect yourself from police brutality. Protect," a black man holding a gun, and the sign say, and the caption reading, "Protect yourself from racial profiling. Protect yourself from hate crimes."
You know, that's very interesting, Professor Truth, because there's a cop, I think it's in Missouri. Don't quote me on that correctly. There's a cop, he's been raping a whole bunch of women, mostly black. And he's not a black cop, by the way. That's going to hurt the feminist feelings out there. How is it that this man has been out there raping all these black women? He's a police officer. You don't see the feminists lined up to demand the ferreting of the police departments. They want to talk about street harassment. They don't want to discuss, by the way, white daddy is doing things. Folk are saying this in Oklahoma. Okay. Because I only skimmed over it. But I found that to be very interesting. I don't see the feminists having their protests and marching and demanding that we do something about the police. They've never once mentioned that. And that is because they are apparatchiks of the police, of the state. And as you said before, they're trying that hustle. That maybe if they bow and bedwinch long enough, that there will be a place in white society made for them, if they can betray enough of us. You talked about the horizon, Professor Truth, and how these people have not done anything about what they see coming over it. Isn't that very interesting that it's interesting that you would say that, because that means they knew. There is no, gentrification is not a new term. It's been around for decades. Black people have known about this for decades now. We have known this was a problem. Skyrocketing real estate prices in New York. We've known about it for decades now. Dr. Claude Anderson, Bob Law, John Henrik Clark, Joseph Ben Yochanan, I mean the gods and prophets, have been preaching to our people now for decades about these very things, and they sat there twiddling their thumbs and ignoring it. In some cases, in a lot of cases, mocking them. A lot of folk respected Dr. Claude Anderson, but a lot of y'all mocked him. Dr. John Henry Clark, a lot of y'all cooned and danced with Skip Gates. A lot of you did that. A lot of you. And now that the prophecies are coming to pass, you want us to sit here and pretend that you didn't know it. And that's why I want you all to take names. When you find them on the internet, you find them on your job or whatever, take names. Because I want to know, where are all the happy hotep and I don't need money people right now to go to Brooklyn and help those black folk who are being put out on the streets right now? Where are you? I put out a call to find out anybody who wants to tell me how we can help folk in Detroit without money. I haven't received a single response. I'll put it out again tonight. If you got a way for us to get these folks water without using any money, tonight is the time for you to be talking. I put this call out weeks ago, Professor Truth. We ain't heard from nobody yet. We asked them to actually show us proof of what they believe, and so far it hasn't happened. And that's what the hell we've been fighting against. And maybe some parched lips and some dehydration inside your own house will help you to decide that you don't want to sit here talking and speaking stupid anymore. Because you may want to argue with us over the truth, but it's time that you grew up, put some adult pants on, and actually accepted the reality of the situation that you are in. And start accepting some adult solutions to this problem. Because we have entirely too many black people who have become expert debaters. And they want to debate at everything. They're not even logical debaters. They're just expert at talking all the damn time. You want to sit up here and squeal about your churches And yet Creflo Dollar has not lined up to help a damn black person in New York. Show me what Creflo Dollar, while he rents out Madison Square Garden every Sunday, done turn that into his church. Show me what he's doing to stop gentrification, or to at least mobilize black people in New York. To at least slow it down. Can you show me what he's doing? Or are you going to tell me that that's not the pastor's place either? So it's just nobody's place to stop this, nobody's place to do this, and if you end up homeless, that's okay. Well, if you believe that being homeless, if you cannot make the differentiation between a fraud and factual, if you cannot make the differentiation between a coon and the conscious, if you cannot make a differentiation between homelessness and empowerment, then you don't deserve to survive any longer. Evolution is about to take its course where you're concerned, because you don't know the difference between survival and extinction. If you are at this point still arguing about it. Black people, the politicians do not like us because we are black. Yes, there is a white supremacist bent, but they have the ability to ignore us because we are poor and black. They do not like you because you are black, but they have the ability to ignore you because you are poor and black. If you were not poor, they could not ignore you, because you would be able to bring so much power, wealth, and influence to bear on them that they would be scrambling for the hills. They simply could not ignore you. They would have to figure out some way to make you happy. Some way to at least get you off their ass. They'd have to figure out something. You see, this broadcast doesn't talk about a bunch of spirituality and spiritual concepts, because 99% of our problems are physical, i.e. economic. And most black people are completely and totally unqualified to speak on that. That's why they don't do it. They get you in a room and they want to talk about history and religion. History and religion. Religion. Boom, boom, boom. Religion. Everything is about religion. Religion. Spirituality. But they can't show you how their spirituality is going to revoke that notice to vacate that you just got. You notice that all these people want to have their debates and seminars and stuff, but they don't want to discuss what to do about that eviction notice. They don't want to discuss what to do about gentrification. They don't want to discuss what to do about poverty. They're talking about this kid, black kid from Chicago in the World Little Leagues, and how his folk are homeless. He's returned from the Little League World Series to the family's essentially homeless. Got mom and dad in the home, but cannot take care of their son. I want to hear all of the spirituality people get off your ass and come explain to that boy and his family how your spiritual system can save them now, because I'm bringing power, wealth, and influence, and you say we don't need that. So I'm just going to sit here for a moment, and I want you all to gather up anybody who would dare try to argue with us and say that we need spirituality, all that money stuff is for white folk. Get them and say, okay, you dumb bastard, you sit up here and explain to us how your spirituality is going to help them with their eviction notice. Tell us right now how it helps. I had one world champion jigaboon a few years ago, and I told you all about that on the broadcast. He told us that if we focused on our spirituality, we would... I said, how does spirituality put food and water on the table? He said, if we focused on our spirituality, then we would realize that the human body does not need food and water. That's right, that's what he said. He said that if we would only focus on our spirituality, we would realize that we don't need food and water. We just need to nourish our spirit. That was his solution to your missed meal cramps and your malnutrition and your dehydration. He would sit there and tell all the folks in Detroit that they need to focus on their spiritual bodies, and then they wouldn't have to worry about water anymore. But we stink because we haven't bathed. If you would focus on your spirituality, you wouldn't need Irish Spring and Dial anymore. That was what a grown-ass man said. And you got folk who'll sit there and will actually agree with that idiotic drivel. And that is what passes for an individual who can be taken seriously among black people. He would be run out of the room among any other group of people except black folk. And I'm saying that he and the people who are dumb enough, brain dead enough, and numbskulled enough to listen to him, both he and all of them need to be run out of the room too. That was why I told you all that it has to be Black Nuremberg. It has to be. It must be. Because the only way that we're going to survive is a Black Nuremberg, where we gather up the leaders and the ones who listen to them and say, you're all guilty. You all must go. All of you have to go. And everybody who is not on the empowerment train, you must go as well. Everybody has to go. No more arguing about this. I put up an article earlier this week where I was showing you all that Jessica Alba, that's right, the actress Jessica Alba, I don't care if you like her, I don't care if you don't. I don't care if you think she's cute, I don't care if you don't. I don't care if you think she can act, I don't give a damn if you don't. I do know that she is an investor and a part owner of a company that has been valued at $900 million and is getting ready for its initial public offering, where they are setting the price of this company at almost $1 billion. That Jessica Alba is about to make a lot of money. She's not, and unlike Jay-Z, she's not some 1% owner either. 1/3 of 1% owner. No, she owns a big chunk of it. And she's about to take home. This little girl is about to venture off into Mark Zuckerberg territory. And I'm looking at Halle Berry, if we want to compare actresses. That's what that Hispanic actress is doing. I take a look at Halle Berry and I wonder. And I take a look at Zoe Saldana and I wonder. And I take a look at Vanessa Bell and I wonder. And I take a look at Viola Davis and I wonder. And I wonder. I take a look at Angela Bassett and I wonder, what did you ladies do with all that money all this time? Because I can see what Jessica Alba is doing. I can see what she's doing. I'm taking a look at our black actresses and actors, rappers with enough money years ago to drink Jessica Alba under the table, and yet I wonder, okay, I see what she's done with her money. Ashton Kutcher has made so much money in investments, people. In investment. First of all, he had plenty of money before he came to Hollywood. That's the first thing. That young man has so much money from investments that he is now announcing that he wants to retire from acting altogether. That's right, Ashton Kutcher, who last most prominently played Steve Jobs in that autobiographical movie, in that biographical film. Well, guess what? He is now announcing that he wants to retire, or at least he's seriously considering retiring from acting now. He's like, well, damn. It's not like I even make most of my money or most of my mark on the world from Hollywood anyway. And I take a look at Will Smith. Oh, yes, I'm going to call it out. I take a look at Sam Jackson. I take a look at Wesley Snipes. I take a look at James Earl Jones, Louis Gossett Jr. I can go down the list if you would like. I wonder, what do you fellas do with all the money that you got? What did you do with it? Because Ashton Kutcher has money invested outside of the entertainment industry. I didn't say from the difference between his TV show and movies. I mean, he's got plenty of investments outside of the entertainment industry that have nothing to do with entertainment whatsoever. He's not getting residuals from a TV show or nothing. He's got investments outside of it altogether. And I take a look at our black actors and black rappers while Kanye West wants to become the next Versace, as if he's really qualified to do that. He wants to become the next Versace. Meanwhile, Ashton Kutcher and do you know how punk made and hoe made you gotta look that Jessica Alba is now doing figure eights around you? Do you know how homemade you have to be for Jessica Alba to be doing figure eights around you? She's not just doing donuts, she's doing figure eights now. And you think we're going to respect you. Jay-Z, you ain't did nothing either. They are not movers of wealth. They have no investments that they control. Jay-Z does not have a single investment that he himself controls. And we as black people need to understand that these people are not playing anymore. I said it 4 years ago. And I'm going to say it again tonight for those of you who didn't say it when we said it then. Jessica Alba is a Latina. So is Ava Longoria. So are all the others. I can run down the list if you'd like. And they have made one thing very, very clear. That as far as they are concerned, this will be the last generation of bean pickers out of a necessity in Hispanic society. You might have laughed at them for the last 3 decades. You might have called them names. You might have made your jokes. You even had a bunch of Mexican comedians making jokes about it. But the Black Channel was the first one that said that we are witnessing the last generation of bean pickers. And that the next generation will be movers of wealth. Because they're coming out them fields and they have absolutely no intentions of going back. Mark Cuban is your proof that they are leaving them fields and they have no intention of going back. Jessica Alba, Robert Rodriguez, we can go down the list if you'd like. They are your proof. You used to not have any Latino millionaires. Now they're all over. Now you got millionaires and billionaires. And they are showing you that they're not relying on population numbers. They are relying on power, wealth, and influence. Dr. Claude Anderson's lessons may have fallen on deaf ears among black people, but let me tell you something. They didn't fall on deaf ears among Hispanics. Didn't fall on deaf ears among them. Do you still have any support for Negroes who are out here falling behind Jessica Alba? How much more of a wake-up call do you damn well need? What is their excuse? Folks who had a lot more money, black people who had a lot more money than Jessica Alba, and yet she's made money off of environmentally friendly products. Black folks sitting here twiddling our thumbs. Jessica Alba will still be able to afford to live in New York City and in Brooklyn in 30 years. Will you? She's making sure that her children will still be able to live in New York or LA or wherever. She's not watching the rate of inflation. She's not watching the rate of unemployment. She's just making sure that her children have what is necessary to survive the next 100 years. You see, this place, we are not here to sell you lies. This is why if you listen to frauds and fakers and clowns and idiots who give you no facts, brothers and sisters, I'm not here to tell you that you're all going to survive the next 100 years, because you're not. A bunch of you have made mistakes that you are simply not going to be able to recover from because there is not time. We're not here to tell you how to stop the extermination. We are here to tell you how to survive it. We are here to discuss what you need to do to survive it. And that is why when you turn on other people, they want to talk. They say they're going to stop white supremacy, but then everything they talk about has to do with praying and spirituality and doing a march somewhere. We're just going to get together and all walk in one direction. What we going to do when we get finished walking? We're going to be at City Hall. What about then? We're going to let them know we're upset. You do not let your mayor and your city council know that you are upset by standing outside the city hall waving a bunch of damn poster boards. You let them know that you are upset by bringing your power, wealth, and influence to bear and targeting every city council member for removal. And I already showed you all that Ferguson, Missouri is 67% black, but their city government is 85% white. Between the mayor and the 6 city council people, you only have one black person in that whole equation. One black city councilman. The other 5 city councilmen and the mayor are white. In a city that is 67% black, and everybody wants to riot and stuff, but what have you done with that 67% majority? You are being lorded over by the other 33%. Lorded over. Now, if Reverend Al is not going to show up and tell you what to do to take control of that, I don't want to hear it. But guess what? Nobody wants to discuss with you how to do that, because nobody wants to tell you that the reason that you are victims of police brutality, gentrification, low employment, low education, and every other social ill that you are encountering is because you have not made a priority of getting up and building an economy. You have not made a priority of getting up and building businesses. And as long as you have no businesses, you do not generate money. And as long as you don't generate money, you are poor, and poor people have no rights. Poor people have no rights of any kind. You don't have voting rights. You don't have educational rights. You don't have civil rights. You don't have human rights. Poor people have no rights. In the words of Roger B. Tawney, no rights that the rest of society is obligated to accept. You have no rights that anyone else in society is obligated to consider. And as black people, we have refused to accept that. They don't have to honor your rights because you don't have any. Because poor people do not have an ability to affect the world around them other than to be angry. And we can break windows and we can set fires. And believe it or not, there's a time and place for that too. But after the window breaking and the fire setting, I want to know what we're going to do next. Because we can't build an economy breaking windows and setting fires. That's not going to build an economy. That's not going to build a business. What are we going to do next? And when you need to make sure that you only give credibility to individuals who have the ability or the means to answer that question in a sensible, rational, and logical manner. When you ask them, what are we going to do next? They better have an answer for you that makes sense. Because if it doesn't, if they start talking about praying and protesting and moonshining and monkey shining while you're at it, then I expect you, I put the responsibility on you. When somebody gives you an irrational, unworkable, unfeasible, impractical answer, I put the responsibility on you to get up and walk away. You are supposed to get up, walk away, turn off their videos, turn off the TV, whatever. You're supposed to get up and leave them at that moment. You're not supposed to try to spare their feelings. You're not supposed to try to make them feel okay about that. You are supposed to get up and walk away. Professor Truth, Ferguson is just one of many places. Ferguson is a microcosm of Detroit, a microcosm of Atlanta. Well, until white folk take over here in a couple of years in Atlanta, as a matter of fact, because the population is about to shift back. A microcosm of DC, a microcosm of Harlem, Brooklyn, and a dozen other black neighborhoods. I don't use the word community. A dozen other black neighborhoods that we could name that are all befalling the same fate. We thought that having numbers would save us. We thought that being poor would be a barrier. And now they're finding out the hard way that that's just simply not so. What are they going to do now, brother?
They're going to go away. That's what they're going to suffer a lot first. Then they're going to go away. Because as black people, we've taken up this idea that apparently we're going to have a road to the future that we can pave without having to get any money to do so and without having to put out any effort. We're always trying to find these end runs around those two things, money and effort. We pray because praying is free, and God will do the heavy lifting. We beg because begging is cheap, and we're asking someone else to do the heavy lifting. We demonstrate because demonstrating is cheap, and we're trying to get somebody else to do the heavy lifting. As black people, we're sitting here taking on the illusions that apparently there's some magic pixie dust that's going to give us what we want. And apparently we're expecting to get that for free as well. And what we're finding out is, no, there is no shortcut to empowerment other than work and working to get the financial resources that you need. You will get it no other way. I had some idiot who actually tried to debate me and say that, well, you know, Chinatown in New York got gentrified too. Yeah, but the problem was the Asians moved into New Jersey. Where are the black people going to move? They can't afford to live in New York or New Jersey. They already cut you off at New Jersey a long freaking time ago. It's time out for all of this garbage about, well, maybe we'll survive some way. You know, that's exactly what the Caribbean Indians probably thought when the Europeans showed up, what the Tasmanians thought, and what the native people of Australia thought. We'll survive somehow. We've always been here. We'll be here in some form or another. Nah, it don't always work that way. In the 21st century, when the competition for resources has never been more vicious, never been more savage, you better start getting your feet and your mind and your hands and your wallets into the real world. Instead of sitting here trying to build for a colorblind future, you better start building for a future of black first. Because a lot of you are thinking that you're going to swirl your way into the future. You ain't going to make it that far. Ask the good folks of Harlem and Brooklyn. No. This is not a game. It's deadly serious. You look around you and you see where the black people with power, wealth, and influence, because when things really get hot out here in the next few years, those are going to be the only people you can go to. They're going to be the only ones who have even a snowball's chance, even a prayer. Building an economy is not some sort of intellectual exercise. Building an economy is not just something that pointy-headed intellectuals and armchair academics talk about. Building an economy is an idea whose time is way past due. It is an idea that should have been acted upon hundreds of years ago, that really there's no excuse for not having acted on it since the 60s, and it is the only chance we've got right now. And I do not think for a moment that we are alone. The Indiegogo that we ran proved that. There are black people out here who get that. And let me expand on that for just a minute before we get back to all this unpleasant talk, because we're not here to make you feel good. We're here to sober you up. But I do think that intelligent black society is the leading edge, and the tip of the spear is the B1 Brigade. And I do think that we have begun, and I don't want to give us too much credit for this, but I do think that we have begun to have an effect. The stated goal of the blackchannel.net experiment was that we were going to take control of the social discourse within our people, and we were going to elevate the debate. That was our stated goal. That we were not merely going to get involved in the conversation, we were going to take control of it. And I think that's bearing itself out. When we started this 5 years ago, you had a lot of people who were arguing with us, a lot of people doing their own thing, and we said, look, just be patient. Black people have a problem with that. They are going to come to our position. They will have no choice because the ones who don't will be killed where they stand. And a lot of the clowns who are focusing on trivialities, who are focusing on sex, cars, clothes, and hoes, and pseudo-spiritual nonsense, people who focused on things other than power, wealth, and influence, now what is happening is they're starting to talk like us. See, that's what happens when times get tight. That's what happens when you live in a world that runs on money and you find yourself in the middle of an economic war and you're barehanded. Ain't a whole lot of dancing and twerking and getting turned up that's going to go on when you're getting picked off and wiped out. So no, we're not changing the message. We're not going to spice it up so it can be more palatable to those of you who wish that we would talk about a multiracial economic coalition when nobody else on the planet talks that kind of stupidity. There ain't nobody out of 7 billion people on the planet. Black people are the only ones talking that nonsense. How the hell can you have an alliance with other people when you are the weakest member of the alliance? That's not an alliance. That's servitude. All you can do is go along with what everybody else says. In an alliance, there must be give and take. Everyone has an equal voice and everyone must be listened to. And if you're the weakest member of an alliance, then what that means is you go along to get along. And as black people, we have been trying to do that and it doesn't work. We're looking for substitutes to power, wealth, and influence. Well, in that case, then go ahead and tell me what's the substitute going to be for water, food, and a roof over your head. Ask the good people in Detroit, what's your substitute going to be for drinking water? Ask the people in New York, in Bedford-Stuyvesant, in Brooklyn, in Harlem, ask them what your substitute is going to be for a roof over your heads. After Hurricane Katrina, you had 100,000 black people who you could ask that question to, and their substitute answer was, we're going to go find roofs in Houston. Yeah, but you didn't find anything that could take the place of that roof. You just proved the point. You will run to the other side of the freaking state, across the state line, that's what it takes to find a roof. So we can all agree there is no substitute. But can we all agree that there better not be any other focus other than power, wealth, and influence? Can we agree on that? Oh, we can't agree on that? We got to still have a debate? Nah, debate's over. We're through arguing. At this point, everybody's squadding up. Intelligent black society's squadding up. And no, we are not letting in the fakers, frauds, and the apathetic fools who apparently thought that they were going to have a place on a plantation that the white man burned down 50 years ago. You didn't tear down the plantation, he did. And he did it because he was making a statement, and the statement is, I don't need any more slaves. So since everybody's squatting up, that's what the discussion's going to be about now. Anything that black people look at, anything that we seek to set our hands to, anything we seek to be involved in, we are supposed to own it, or at the very least, we are supposed to have a decisive say in how that thing goes. You know what you call that? You call that influence. And if you own it outright, you call that power. If you do not control it outright, at the very least, you better have some influence. Because when the Ferguson Police Department or the New York PD shows up, the only thing that's going to stop them when you have inferior numbers is going to be superior power, superior influence. That will be what stops it. See, there's a reason why you don't see armored personnel carriers in the Hispanic neighborhoods. There's a reason why you don't see white people sitting here going into Asian enclaves in San Diego, in Orange County, in San Francisco. You don't see them sitting there shooting Asian kids, even though the Asian kids have wholesale run the white kids out of the universities. White people understand when you speak the language of power, wealth, and influence, and the Asians are, without question, the influence in California. They haven't got the power to outright get what they want across the board, but you go to Silicon Valley, and by and large, Asians run the yard. And when you go to Orange County, let me make a prediction for you. Two places, San Francisco, that's Northern California, and San Diego, that's Orange County, that's Southern California. Asians are going to have both of those places on lock. I'm talking about they will be the power in the next 2 generations. They are the fastest growing per capita, fastest growing ethnic group, but as it stands, the way the Hispanics have been demanding that none of the illegals from Mexico be kicked out, the Asians are saying the same thing about Koreans and Thais and Chinese. And they're getting their way because the politicians can't stay in office without Asians. And the corporations are looking for very cheap brain share. It ain't about how strong a back you got, it's about how strong a brain you have. And the Asians have distinguished themselves in that regard. So the employers want Asians to power their companies, and the politicians want Asians to power their political war chests. So the Asians are not concerned about somebody deciding that they're going to kill an Asian kid, and they sure as hell ain't scared of the San Diego Sheriff's Department. They ain't scared of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. They ain't concerned about whether or not they're going to get gentrified out of existence. They got a fallback position because they can afford it. And by the way, I say this in passing, where did they get a lot of their seed money from? Those Asian laundromats and those crappy Asian restaurants and those bootlegs and knockoffs that the Asians are putting out there on the streets and their convenience stores. Where do they get their seed money from? They get their seed money from black people. That's why Jason, a lot of people think that Jason's the meanest man who ever walked the face of the earth when he says he doesn't want to hear black people talking about how they don't have any money. The hell we don't. We got money for everything. What we don't have is economic discipline. Our money's flying all over the place except to the place where it needs to be most. And this is not a matter of the quality of goods and services. That's a canard. If you had 3 white people in front of you and 10 black merchants beside you, guess what? You'd still skip those 10 black merchants and go to the 3 white ones. As black people, we should not have to fight each other for each other's patronage. We shouldn't have to have an argument about that. We shouldn't have to be sitting here trying to push and pull and can I get you to buy something? Oh, your stuff ain't cheap enough. Okay, you went to the freaking Arab store to buy some of that rotten meat. Yeah, that was cheaper and it made you sick. We make money into something that we want to avoid a discussion on until it comes time to talk about dealing with black businesses. Then we'll talk about money and say that the prices are too high. And what's the difference in price? 75 cents, $1. We've become professional poor mouthers with each other. That white department store you want to go to, the one that has you arrested for showing up, you got money for that, don't you? With your income tax return. Yeah, we could start a business with it. Yeah, we can make some investments with it. But you know what the best part is? I can give it to white people. Because that's what God put me on this earth to do. He put me here to support white businesses. Or you got the white car dealership. Yeah, there are a couple of black ones out there, but we don't deal with black car dealerships. Why? Well, he won't. Brother man's supposed to understand he's supposed to give me the hookup. That white man, by the time his financial officer is through, whatever you finance that car for costs almost twice what it would have cost you if you went to the black one. But you're expecting the black one to give you the hookup. Too many black people who ain't ready to do business. And that's the reason why intelligent black society is not and cannot afford to be a big tent. We cannot afford to be a big tent because we made that mistake for the last 150 years. We have given respect to, and we have given credibility to, and we have tolerated every clown, charlatan, fool, and crackpot theorist who's come among us. And as the result, we have become a group walking basket case. So weak, so divided, so undermined, so just directionless and disorganized that we can't even exercise power in the places where we are the vast majority. They still got us running scared. Ferguson ought to be a black enclave on lock. New Orleans ought to be on lock. Detroit should be the black Mecca of the Western Hemisphere, not Atlanta, Detroit. They got a bigger black population, and who the world was fighting to get into those car plants during the 30s, 40s, and 50s? Black people were. It's not as if we didn't have black employees. We had tons of black employees there. We had a legitimate middle class, a real one. But the problem was our legitimate middle class wanted to be a servant class. They didn't take their money and invest. They didn't take their money and start black businesses. What they figured was they could be a bunch of well-paid slaves. Kind of sounds like all those professional athletes we got now, doesn't it? So instead of Detroit becoming an economic mecca, it became an economic basket case, and now it's become an economic failure. And there is no hope for Detroit. The only hope for it would come from the ground up, but in order for a grassroots movement to start, you have to have an economic foundation. And the economic foundation for black people in Detroit is not merely broken. At this point, it is crumbled on its way to disintegration. What do you think that emergency finance manager was about? He was not there as white people's representative. They already had representatives there. He was there to begin the total wholesale slaughtering of what little black community there was in Detroit. This is the beginning of the end of black Detroit. The emergency finance manager was sent there to make Detroit into a safe haven for wholesale gentrification. And in Detroit, it's going to be easy. See, in Harlem, there was a little bit of a pushback because the money wasn't quite so sure how to get in there. But in Detroit, no such confusion. They had the governor spearheading the effort. I'm talking about the white one, Sebelius. And they had black mayors who were more interested in having sex with their chief of staff and hanging out with hookers than they were in preserving their power. The Kilpatrick clan made it their business to get reelected, and it never occurred to them that white people would not vote for them. If the Kilpatrick clan had had any brains, they would have been ensuring their future by making sure that, A, you got to get them prosecutors off your back. That's the first thing that any black enclave must have. You must have control of law enforcement. Once you get your economic game in order, you better start going after law enforcement because they're going to be coming after you. You would have thought we'd have learned by now. They can't indict you if you put the DA in office. And the state attorney general would never bring a case against you if he was depending on you for financial contributions. And even if he did, if the judges knew that you were the reason that they got put up there in the first place and that they're not going to make it to the federal courts unless they do what they're told at the state courts. See, you don't hear, there were a lot of Asians who were involved in the 2008 economic scandal and going back before that. You need to go look up the real story on Arthur Anderson and Enron and others. There was a reason why Enron was building those failed power plants that never even got finished in India and other Asian countries. There were a lot of Asians who made out like bandits during the first 10 years of the new millennium. But how many of those Asians? There was one guy whose name escapes me right now. He made something like $200 million. The white guys were going to prison. The white guys were getting arrested and investigated. But the Asians weren't. You want to know why? Because the Asians made sure, if nothing else, they made sure that they had their game straight as far as the judicial authorities went. The Asians knew what happened with that whole Asian sedition law and the Chinese exclusion laws. They understood that the lawmakers were a problem, and that the courts were a problem, and that the prosecutors were a problem. Did you know that there are more Asian judges in America than there are Asian politicians? And that ain't just because there's more Asian lawyers. The Asians have targeted the law enforcement infrastructure. They've targeted them because they understand, they learned the lessons of the early 20th century when the courts were going after them. They learned we better have the courts on lock. And that's what they did. To the point now where you got Asians running for judgeships in places that are majority black. Take a look at Mississippi. Take a look at Louisiana. Take a look at D.C. This is not a numbers game. The only number that matters is how many dollars that you have to bring to the table. In a world that runs on money, you are basically in a poker game. And the poker game is not decided by how many fools are at the table. The guy who usually wins the poker game is the one who brought the most money, because he can afford to make the most mistakes, and he can afford to also raise the ante to the point where everyone else has to fold. That's what happens in a world that runs on money, and black people are fools for trying to find substitutes for that, because the game ain't going to change, and the rules ain't going to change, and once you are out, they're not going to deal you a new hand. Because in a world that runs on money, the whole objective is to have one winner. And we are trying to educate our people that in a world this dangerous, you better be angling for the winner to be black. Because ain't going to be no charity for the losers. We didn't establish the rules. We're just trying to survive the game. Some of us are trying to survive the game. Now, the point that I make with that little excursion through Asian influence on the economic front is simply so that black people understand that when black people are supposed to be getting power, wealth, and influence, you get your economic game in order, then you better start targeting those law enforcement places. First thing you ought to be doing is getting your people in there. You should not be looking to buy politicians. That is an effort of last resort. You do that when you just haven't been able to crack it. When you have an opponent who has insulated himself just enough where you can't take some of his spots. It's chess. And the whole idea of chess is to remove the opponent's players from the board. If you cannot remove his players from the board, you at least hem them in. You contain them. And that's where renting and leasing politicians comes in. But your first objective is supposed to be to overrun their position. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I talking about economics as if it were warfare, as Umar Johnson said? You're supposed to be overrunning their position. If you know that the sheriffs are going to come after you, if you know that they're going to be mounting kangaroo courts against you, if you know that they're going to be bringing phony baloney charges just so that they can get some taint on you or put you in jail or try to tie up your resources fighting court battles, if you know that's going to come, if you know that's going to be their objective, then why the hell don't you take steps to prevent it? In his book, The Art of War, which I know most of you talk about, but you ain't read because I haven't seen you exercising the principles, Sun Tzu said it himself. He said that the wise do not depend on the enemy to be unlucky. They do not depend on the enemy to be poorly prepared. The wise count on their enemy being lucky, and then they plan means to counteract his luck. They count on the enemy being well prepared, and they count on having means by which to counter his preparation. Victory is not about good fortune. You make your own luck on the battlefield. And that starts with the economic battlefield, because no army can go to war without being financially fortified. Don't believe me? Look at Ferguson. On the one hand, you got a squad that's well organized, well fortified, armed to the teeth. And on the other side, you got a bunch of guys with their shirts off, barehanded, some of them throwing bottles for the few who can afford to do so. There is no substitute for power, wealth, and influence.
You know what was really interesting about that, Professor Truth, is that we all remember, as you mentioned before, about Occupy Wall Street. Has there been a single cop prosecuted for police brutality during Occupy Wall Street? And
there's not.
Those were white kids they were beating up on. That's the control and the power of the 1%. That's right. And Negroes think that they're going to pray and spiritualize their way to salvation. Okay. Professor Truth mentioned a good book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. I wanted to ask a quick question here. I want to ask everybody in the chat room here tonight, just to check and see how much people are up on their history about these things, to make sure we don't forget that. The term survival of the fittest. Who was the man behind that term, survival of the fittest? We all talk about the survival of the fittest nowadays. Well, who was the man who coined that phrase, survival of the fittest? And do you remember what he was referring to when he coined that phrase? Okay, Rick from New York has said that. Everybody in the chat room there, okay. They're all pretty much answering the same thing. They say Charles Darwin. Darwin created the phrase survival of the fittest. That is wrong. Charles Darwin did not create the phrase survival of the fittest. Charles Darwin used the phrase survival of the fittest, but he got the phrase, admittedly so, from another man, Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer was the man who created the phrase survival of the fittest. And Herbert Spencer was a social, what would become later known as a social Darwinist. For those of you who do not know, from the very beginning, the terms survival of the fittest were meant in socioeconomic application, not physical, although ultimately that would affect the physical, of course. But from the very beginning, the very origins of the concept of survival of the fittest, Darwin just took that social hypothesis and simply came up with a scientific basis to reinforce it. And now we accept this law because not only was it proven socially, it's now been proven physically. So that was part of the reason for his trip to Galapagos and other places. To concretely codify that social belief of the survival of the most fit. Those who are most fit to survive. You see, you can tell how much a person knows about something or cares about something by that gleam in their eye. And when you see that somebody's ears perk up when you start talking about something, you find that that's something that they're really concerned about. Europeans see economics as what it is. Economics is war by other means. And they understand, they see these things as conquest. Investment bankers see themselves as conquerors. Don't you know how great it was in their minds to be able, go ahead and go take a look at some documentaries that have been done about Iraq. You ought to see some of the freeways in Iraq. They look like anything that you could drive through in Omaha. More deserts, but that is, and in their minds, that was great. Don't you know that in their minds, the greatest thing that they could do for their own personal legacy is to tear down those sand-colored buildings and to make the whole place look like Dubai or Qatar or the United Arab Emirates? Don't you know that in the minds of your European and American investment bankers, that they see that as their legacy, transforming the desert into a kingdom of glass and steel, what they did in America? They see that as their legacy now, to go there and to conquer with their dollars and their culture. That when we came over here, you were riding on camels and living in tents. And when we got done, the whole damn place looked like Midtown Manhattan. Looked like LA when we got done. That's conquest. That's conquering. And guess what? It doesn't matter how desirable they consider those people to be or not. Conquest has no desire for your history. Conquest has no desire for your architecture. Conquest has no desire for your culture, for your women, for your way of life. Conquest is here to remove your way of life and to replace it with their own. That is what conquest is built for. That's what conquest focuses on doing. And guess what? The conquerors have now fixed their eyes on Brooklyn and Harlem and Queens and Detroit and DC. And nothing will make that investment banker, that Wall Street banker, that real estate developer, nothing will make them feel more validated as human beings than to walk the streets of Harlem surrounded by black people that they can own and buy and sell. Because that is exactly what they can do right now in Harlem. You talked about being the only black person in a white neighborhood. You were the poorest person there. You got the most raggedy house there. But you were so thrilled and so elated and so ecstatic that you were actually able to get there. This white man has no problem being the only white person in a black neighborhood, so long as he owns the whole neighborhood. And that is exactly what they are doing now. They are walking the streets of Harlem, but they would not be there if they didn't own anything. And that is why they feel validated to be there, because they know that the house, that the apartment, the condo, the brownstone that they walked out of, they own it. And you don't own yours. They know that they've got something that you don't got. They are owners, you are workers and renters, which essentially makes you a squatter. They are builders, and you are those hoping that you can live under a part of the shade of the builders. And nothing will make them feel more validated than to walk through a neighborhood that used to be white, and then they let the blacks come in. And imagine the stories that these guys will be telling in 10 years, 20 years. Man, this all used to be nothing but broke down tenement housing, the slums and the ghettos. Hell, they used to make music songs about how ratty and slummy and tore down it was. People thought you could never clear up Brooklyn. They thought you could never clean up Harlem. They looked at these housing projects. They thought you could never clean this up. And we came through here with $1 billion line of credit. We tore down those housing projects, or we took $100 million and renovated the housing projects, and we turned them into $1 million condos today. It is an economic model for the rest of the country and the world. And they said it couldn't be done. They said nobody could do it. Well, we came in here and we did it. That's what their mindset says to them. That's how they see this particular struggle. That you are simply the next mountain that they're going to climb. They're going to pitch their flag. They're going to make their mark in the world by clearing you out. Because they said that it couldn't be done. They said that there were too many of you. They said it was too filthy and too dirty. They said that nobody would ever want Harlem after the Negroes got done with it. They said that nobody would ever want Bedford-Stuyvesant after black folk got done with it. They're too filthy, too nasty, too slummy. And these guys are going to come in here and show you that. Watch what we do. And guess what? They're doing it. They're doing it. And in the 21st century, the question now will be, are you going to survive what these conquerors are doing, or are you going to be one of the casualties? And from what we're seeing right now in Brooklyn, there's a lot of casualties piling up. We talked about Leo Grand, who was made homeless by gentrification, and all I can say about that is, Leo, you're gonna have plenty of company on that park bench next to you. A lot of company. Like all the black folk in Harlem and Brooklyn company. Professor Truth, I'll let you have the last word.
Jason, you just gave everybody here, myself included, a glimpse of the future. We have just been told what the headlines are going to read. It's going to be the New York Times with a cover story of a bunch of white guys and maybe a front Negro just to ward off the inevitable racial accusations. The men who changed Harlem. The men who made the new Harlem. That's what's coming, folks. They're going to pave the road to the future over your former communities. I'm sorry, neighborhoods. Over your ramshackle homes and over your dead bodies. And the headlines will not read genocide. It won't even read gentrification. It will read rebirth in Detroit. The new DC. Getting rid of the slums in Harlem. Coming to a black enclave near you. Black first.
We remember a time when you said rock music, you only thought about black folk. That was the reason that white folk didn't like Elvis Presley. The parents didn't like him because Chuck Berry had created rock and roll. And Elvis Presley was a white boy acting just like Chuck Berry. Just like them Negroes in the Negro honky tonks. The blues clubs. Those kinds of terms that actually got their birth in black communities. Juke joints. Well, here we are, 2 generations later, and there is nobody in America who associates rock and roll with black people. When you think of rock, you think of Metallica. You think of a bunch of white guys. You don't even think about the people who created it. Jazz, they have been trying to muscle us out of it because it was the first major American musical art form. It was made by us. And don't you know that if it's going to be an American art form, the first thing they want to do is make sure it's an American white form? Well, you know what that means? That means that they gotta get rid of us. And they have been removing us as the face of jazz. Moved on into blues. Now, even with more recent creations, hip-hop and R&B, here comes Eminem and Robin Thicke. And now Iggy Azalea. If you do not believe that one day you will pick up an issue of the New Yorker magazine, the New York Times, the New York Daily News, and see 3 young, I'm talking about Mark Zuckerberg age, 24 and 25, young white males, standing at the corner of 125th and MLK. If you don't think that you can see that happen, 3 white males standing there and they say, the men who built Harlem. That's right. Oh, I said it just like that. If you don't believe that that can happen, If you don't believe that they can really pull that off and make that occur, where you think about Harlem and you do not think about black people, that you think about white men. If you don't believe that can happen, then quite simply put, you have not been paying attention to the last 100 years of American history. You've just totally checked out and are totally ignorant. Tonight's broadcast, brothers and sisters, is about debunking a great lie, and this is what I want you all to walk away with. You were all raised with a phrase in your minds, a phrase that has deceived you and deluded you, and totally polluted and contaminated your vision about the world today. And you were raised with that phrase in your heads because that's what your parents were told, and it is a lie. It never existed. Because what you saw was not what happened. You were given the phrase white flight. And you took that phrase and processed that phrase and translated that phrase, white flight, in your mind to mean white fear. That they are so afraid of us that when we move into a neighborhood, they scatter out, and that is not what was occurring. They see you as an economic bellwether. If you are gaining enough power, wealth, and influence to move in to their neighborhood, then what they do is they take their power, wealth, and influence and realign and reconstitute and re-balkanize in another neighborhood. You see, whoever has the insurgent power, wealth, and influence is the one who is moving in. White people were not, we now realize that white folk were not moving out of Harlem. They were moving in to Manhattan. They were moving into the Lower East Side. Fast forward to the 21st century. You are now seeing white flight again. They are moving out of Midtown Manhattan, out of the suburbs and into Harlem, into Brooklyn, into Detroit. The power, wealth, and influence, as I stated, whoever is moving in has the momentum. Whoever is moving in has the power, wealth, and influence. And when black folk had it, we concentrated ours towards socially proselytizing and integrating white neighborhoods rather than building a stronger black neighborhood. We wanted to integrate them. We took our power, wealth, and influence and used it for social jollies. They are taking theirs and using it for empowerment. So there is this is just white flight again, only you didn't recognize it this time because these are white people taking their power, wealth, and influence and moving into where you are. But understand, this is white flight. You thought white flight was getting away from you. White flight is not getting away from black people. White flight is consolidating their power, wealth, and influence in one central location. And guess what? They have decided that now the next central location will be where you are. Because they now have enough power. Isn't this pathetic, y'all? The average middle-class white person today, average middle-class white person in New York has enough power, wealth, and influence to gentrify 10, 20, 30 black people. Just by himself, he's got enough economic means to gentrify a few dozen of us. Welcome to white flight in the 21st century. You may call it gentrification. For those of you who missed last night's broadcast here, don't forget that we are starting up a new agenda for the female fitness motivation. So definitely you want to be on board for that, and we want you to get involved with that. So definitely make sure that for all the females out there who want to get involved in that, that'll be available for you too. And for the guys who want to get involved with helping out with that, if you have to put your money where your mouth is, this is your opportunity to do that. Let's make some things happen here. Brothers and sisters, if you haven't been to my Black Authority channel and taking a look at the newest clip from 7 a.m., it will definitely show you what Dr. Claude Anderson has done and what qualifies and validates him to be the godfather of black economics. If you haven't seen that clip, you need to go there and go take a look at it, and it'll definitely open your eyes to a few things. We are still working on it. We'll have some announcements here for you all shortly. Keep your ears and eyes open. If you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, The Black Authority or TBA, either one of those YouTube channels, if you're not subscribed to our Twitter, The Black Channel, or to our Facebook group, the official Jason Black group on Facebook, if you are not subscribed to those, definitely you want to be a part of that so that you can see exactly what's going on and keep up with the latest news and updates and information. If you stay ready, you ain't gotta be ready, and if you stay informed, you don't have to get informed. So let's get on the right track here. In the chat room where they were asking how do you make contributions, you definitely want to go to our PayPal, theblackauthority@yahoo.com. Once again, that email address for PayPal is theblackauthority@yahoo.com. We've made tremendous strides so far. You can use either one of those, either for 7 a.m. or for the female fitness motivation if you wanted to sign up for that. Definitely you can. It's only $20, so you definitely want to be a part of that as well and be on board for that. We're going to make a big move as far as that's concerned too, at least to start this, because folks are out there dumping ice water on their heads. They are putting fire on their bellies and ice on their heads. If that doesn't show you that we're mentally and physically ill, I don't know what will. Between the fire and the ice, we're messed up, folks. It's time to get that fixed for us. Definitely you want to be a part of that and keep your eyes and ears open for future updates. And this concludes tonight's broadcast of the BlackChannel.net radio. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority with Professor Black Truth. And as always, remember that black is the future and the future is uncompromising.